So here's rule number 1 of parenting in the wild. Always let the tiger win at Uno. Okay, not really, but here's what I do know. Kids do not need a screen to fall in love with the world. They need wonder, they need magic, they need passion, they need stories, they need a safari. I'm Suyash Keshri, a wildlife presenter, filmmaker, and conservationist. I just wrapped up a wild chat with Mappa Bear, talking about conscious parenting, wildlife, and why your next vacation should be with binoculars. It's a very fine line. Sharna, I lean towards the fact that zoos are a thing of a past. Parents also understand it's not just a source of entertainment, it's a source of education. The way we address zoos, the way we think of zoos, the way we think of education needs to change.
Hi Suyash, welcome to Mappa Bear. And we are very, very happy to do this episode with you because there are so many questions as a parent, as a mother. You want your child to grow and care more than just screens and schedules and schools. There's a world outside that, you need to coexist. So this episode is with you and we want to know everything about your life, your experience, and what are your takes on, like family safari and, getting your children on family safari. So I would want to start, let's rewind. Let's go back to what sparked your love for wildlife.
Sure. Sharna, first, thank you so much for having me here and to the entire team here at Mappa Bear. It's such a pleasure to be here and share my journey. My journey also started as a very, very young kid. I was just 3 or 4 years old. I grew up in the forests of central India, Madhya Pradesh. That's where I'm born and brought up. And jungles were always the backyard. So over time, we would have deer coming in sometimes to the garden. We would have birds, lots of different birds, different species of birds. We would have langur monkeys ripping up our kitchen garden. So that's what I grew up with. Even in the news channel, they'll be telling us about a leopard sighting nearby, a wolf sighting nearby. Wolves are super rare in central India. And every now and then a tiger would also be seen nearby. So I started going on safaris at a very young age. And I think at a very young age, I decided that this is what I wanted to do in my life. But the journey to convert passion to profession is a long one.
Yeah.
Every now and then, the society convinces you out of it also. So that journey took a very long time, but it's better late than never. So that's why I do what I do, because it just comes from the heart.
You said childhood. What was your age back then?
As I said, I was just 3 or 4 years old.
3 or 4.
And my journey actually started as a result of my Nanaji's influence, introducing me to shows on different channels. So as a young kid growing up, instead of watching Tom catching Jerry, I was watching like hyenas devouring a live animal. I was watching lions and tigers hunting, elephants fighting. That was a very rich childhood to have watching at least on TV.
Yes, absolutely. And if you would not be doing what you're doing today, is there anything that you would be doing or would want to be doing?
Wow, that's a very difficult question to answer because I can't imagine doing anything else. I can't imagine doing anything else and being like happy, content, inspired every morning to do what I do. But if I backed out, if I did not do this, I would have chased my second passion, which is in the sphere of international affairs, global politics. That's what I studied in the US in my university.
Okay.
I graduated with that degree and actually worked in the US. First at US Capitol Hill in the National Congress. Then I worked at a political advocacy firm, but I quit that job to follow this full time. So maybe if I wasn't doing this, I would still be doing that.
Okay, lovely. So are you more of a campfire in the wild or chai in the hills kind of a person?
Campfire in the wild. Campfire in the wild. There's nothing that beats, the spark of the word, the sounds of the word, and then the idea that there could be something lurking around you.
Wow. Tell us one animal encounter that completely changed your perspective.
I think I'm lucky to really witness something new every day, something special every day. But there is one moment that stands apart from the rest. And I'll take a minute to explain that moment. It's of this tigress. Her name is Solo. I knew this tigress since she was a cub herself. She's the first cub I started following since she was a child. And at that time, when I started following her, I was a teenager myself.
Wow.
I knew her mother. Her mother was Rajbera female. I knew her father. And this is in Bandhavgarh National Park in Madhya Pradesh. She used to have three other siblings. We named her Solo because at a very young age, she would be that toddler going away from the mother, trying to go in independent pursuits, chasing a bird, chasing a peafowl, chasing an animal, while the other siblings just watched. She was the naughty one. She was the solo female in the litter of four.
There was a documentary or something that you had done.
Correct.
Short about
Yeah,
her.
correct. It's about Solo itself.
Yes.
But that moment that stood with me is a couple years later, when Solo is now a full grown female. She is asserting her own dominance in a territory, capturing a beautiful area of Bandhavgarh. She's also pushed her mother out of her own territory.
Wow.
And at one point, she had cubs, but another male came to that area, and that male could have killed the cubs. So Solo and that male had a fight. The male's name was Bamira San. Solo saved her cubs, thankfully. Bamira San ran away, even though he was 1.5 times larger than Solo. But Solo suffered a very bad injury. Her chest was ripped open, and she had a scar here, she had a scar here. But at that time, it was just my vehicle. At that time, after the fight, the male ran away, and then Solo came towards me. She walked towards me, stood on the right side of my vehicle, just a little bit distance away from you and I. That's how close it
Wow.
was. And she looked at me with her amber eyes. And I felt a moment of connection that will linger on for the rest of my life.
Wow.
It just felt like she was asking for help or just expressing emotions.
Do you have, like you said, nowadays you have this animal whisperers.
Yeah.
Like, is there something that you feel that, okay, there's some kind of a connection that, I am, or, it's automatically drawn, or it's just learned, or you've learned to live the way you're living right now? Do you feel there's something magical that you,
I
or
think
it's
that-
just the energy that you,
I think it's the energy because there's no whispers as such, but the energy is what translates into, people becoming animal whispers or something. For me, the way I feel that with tigers, I mean, I would love to be called the tiger whisperer someday. And the reason is because if a tiger is walking towards me or if the tiger is doing something, I really feel a sense of connection with them as if they're talking to me. So, for example, there's a tiger named Bajrang.
Yeah.
Whenever he's walking towards me, the minute he looks at me, I know that he wants me to back away. So I start my car, I back away, and then he starts walking back on the road. With Dottie, beautiful tigress, blue-eyed tigress, she is a fierce female and she likes respecting boundaries. Okay, and she walks with her head down all the time. But if she wants space, she will also let you know. She'll just look up and look this way. That means she's letting you know that what you want space. So those are small things that many people might not realize, but I somehow do within that second.
yeah.
And I think that's a connection.
And when we watch your videos, like on YouTube, the virtual safari that you did, you actually bring those connection. It reflects on the screen, like it feels homely. It feels like you're actually connecting with the wild. The kind of the way you talk, the way the soothness, everything. It feels home. Like it's actually connecting the audience, the people who are watching from the screen to the wild. And I think that's a fantastic work that you've done.
Right.
I've been hooked on to safari. I think the virtual safari which you had done. So yes, hats off, and that's a commendable work that
Thank you so much.
You've
That
done.
means a lot to me.
yes. And okay, so do you remember the first time you truly felt connected to nature or animal? When was the first time?
Wow. I think I can't pinpoint that one moment because my upbringing was such in central India that nature was all around us. I think there was one moment though where I knew that I need to connect with nature in a different manner. And that moment was in a zoo actually. When I was 4 years old, my Nanaji had taken me to a zoo in Calcutta, which at that time, the Alipur Zoo was the biggest zoo. It used to have the most number of animals, most number of tigers. There were, I think, like at one point, 100 plus tigers at that time, and very small cages. I was seeing a tiger pace back and forth, and I stood next to her. It was a female. She was looking at me, and she snarled at me like, "Whoa," like that. And just as any other kid, I started jumping, clapping in excitement, like, wow. But my Nanaji came to me and he said, "Beta, तुम इन टाइगरों को देखकर खुश होते हो?" I said, "Yes, Nanaji, absolutely." And I said, and he said, sorry, "That's amazing, but these are not the same tigers that you see on TV shows. These are caught in that cage for the rest of their life. How would you feel if you were confined in this space?" I think that broke my heart at a very early age and taught me over time to connect with the animals, connect with nature in their domain, rather than try capturing that experience and putting that against their will
Yeah.
in front of me. So over time, I just figured out a way to connect with nature, connect with animals by going on safaris and doing so with all others as well.
Wow. And we're gonna touch points on those experiences
Sure.
as well later. So, how did your journey as a conservationist started? Like, you've done a lot of work. You've donated. You worked on, I think, river dams,
What else?
water holes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, when and how did that start?
Yeah, I think for me, conservation is all about creating measurable impact on the ground. Till the time I was just making documentaries, it was all about storytelling and awareness, which, yes, it has its place, but sometimes it's difficult to measure. Did that documentary really lead to something? Yes, it could, but I also wanted it to be measured in a way that I can show the impact, I can see the impact unfolding in front of me, and really have a positive, measurable impact on lives of people, lives of animals. So what happened with Solo over time is that because of the amount of tigers in Bandhavgarh itself, there are actually a lot of tigers in Bandhavgarh, 240 individuals now,
Wow.
and the park can only support about 100. So over time, Solo started getting pushed out of her territory, and she started living next to a water hole near a village. She was drinking from the same water source as villagers. She was feeding on cattle, killing cattle and feeding on cattle. She had 4 cubs. So you can imagine 5 tigers need a lot of cattle. Of course, villagers, that's their livelihood. Cattle is their livelihood. And they're losing cattle every day. Government has a program where they recompensate, or rather than government has a program where they compensate the farmers and villagers for the lost cattle.
Yeah.
Sometimes the compensation can be late, it can be less, but the farmers and villagers decided that they don't want this tiger anymore. So October 17, 2020, news came in that Solo was poisoned along with her cubs. And I think that broke my heart, completely shattered. But also that was such a big loss for conservation. You did not lose one tiger, but you lost a breeding female and 4 of her cubs. They were drinking from the same water source as villagers. They were living alongside them. And yes, in this day and age, unfortunately, that kind of conflict is going to be leading to something like this. So we decided, look, we're going to find a way to make measurable impact on the ground and create more vital habitats for animals. So we started with water holes. We built water holes outside the national park areas, away from villages, in areas that are just reserve forest, which are not in the national park boundary. Slowly, tiger families moved in there, deer moved in there, lots of birds moved in there, and then that became satellite habitats. We empowered anti-poaching efforts. We empowered communities through either getting involved in tourism and having an alternative source of income, or through education programs, taking kids on safari. A lot of kids living in these villages, they haven't even seen a tiger, let alone the adults. And then you tell them to protect a tiger. Why should they when they don't have, shoes or clothes to wear? So balancing that need is very important and critical. And that's where the conservation journey began, to make that impact.
So the conservation journey, it's really personal to you as well, and you have a pet parent as well. Tell us about your companion.
Um, I had to say bye to my companion quite some time back. He's still alive. I'll give you a story, okay? In college, my friends and I decided that we wanted a dog. In the US at Wake Forest University, at that time we were permitted to have a dog. And I applied for an emotional support animal. And the university approved it like this. So we adopted a dog. He's a golden shepherd chow mix.
Oh, wow.
He was found underneath the staircase of an abandoned house, rescued, put into a shelter. And when we rescued him from the shelter, we paid only $50 for him. And he was this tiny, just about 8 weeks old. And immediately he became the center of our lives. Before that, also, I had had many dogs before. I'd taken care of many dogs before. So I was pretty comfortable with dogs. But he opened our lives to so much more. His name was Captain. And through him, I was able to meet so many people, learn so much about my own feelings, learn so much about this amazing animal, so loyal, so wonderful, and always non-judgmental. Pets are not judgmental
Yes.
completely. And I spent 3 years with him. And then when moving back to India, my best friend and I decided, of course, there's no way Captain is going to take a journey to India. It's better for him to just be there. So I had to say bye to him, but I reconnected with him in May.
Yeah.
And he's
I
much older
follow
now.
Cody, yes.
And he was crying, I was crying, and he would not leave me. I spent 5 days with him. I would get up from here and go somewhere, he'd follow me.
Oh,
I'd make a coffee, he'd follow me and sit next to me.
that's a connection, since years. And then after so many years, you guys connected back at the same. You start where you left it. It's like that with them.
Correct.
And it's very. I always say parenting. It's pet parent, either pet parent or human parent. It's almost same. The kind of your life revolves around them. Once you decide to have a child or once you want to have a pet, it's almost the same kind of a journey that you go through.
100%.
And so we also say that we often say kids learn empathy from pets, dogs, cats, animals. What values do you think parents of animals or children can instill today?
I think the most evident in my life is my sister and my niece, and they have a dog as well. So they live very close to us. And whenever I go to their house, I see the interaction between my niece, Kimaya, and the dog, Bella. Bella, of course, came before Kimaya. Kimaya is just 2 years old. And Bella is so gentle and endearing towards Kimaya. Kimaya is like pulling her tail sometimes, playing with her sometimes. But they're like best friends. They're sisters. Also because Kimaya always, when she has a table in front of her full of food, she will look for Bella and she'll just slide some food next to her. So I think there's a little bit of, mischievous relationship between them. But I think what there is to learn from pets is really the amount of love, affection they show towards their human companions unconditionally.
Yeah.
I mean, for Bella to accept Kimaya and everything that Kimaya does and be protective of her is really, really amazing. And I think as a parent, when I'm a parent, I would love to see that relationship unfold as well. This time, like my wife and I, we cannot have a dog because I travel 275 to 300 days of the year. So does my wife. So we don't want that life for a dog. And I think that's another thing that little moving away from the parent-child relationship. But as a dog parent, you should always remember you're bringing a soul into your family. Don't do it for selfish reasons. I love dogs. If I wanted, I would love to have 10, 20, 30 dogs. But even having one is a problem for me, or rather problem for the dog.
Yeah.
Imagine the life. I was going to say hi to it and then be like, okay, I'm leaving for 2 weeks and my caretaker will take care of you. That's not a good life for a dog.
Absolutely.
So it's very important to have those principles in mind before adopting or going ahead and starting a journey of becoming a dog parent.
Absolutely, I agree with this. Nowadays, I see, with the bigger house, the bigger dogs. Smaller house, the smaller dogs.
Yeah.
but I see smaller dogs having bigger dogs as well. So it's, I mean, uh, uh, it's about what's right for them. You need to think. I believe that, you think what's right for them. Like you said, you love dogs, but not necessarily that if you can't take care of it, if you can't commit time to it, then I personally don't believe it's
Yeah. And I think
right.
it's important to mention here, I understand animal behavior very well, whether it's wild animals or pets, cats, dogs. I've trained Captain. I've trained every single dog I've had. Captain walks with me without a leash still. After meeting him after so many years, I can walk without a leash with him, and he'll listen to me. Stay means stay, go means go, everything. But I think a lot of people in India have this fear of dogs. People who are not pet owners. कि अरे ये कुत्ता काट तो नहीं देगा. And a lot of times the dogs are also not well behaved. And that precisely stems from that fractured relationship between the pet owner and the pet itself.
Okay. Yeah.
It's all about just feeding them, not training them, disciplining them, or having that mutual respect. And discipline is always done in a very forceful, aggressive manner. It needs to be nurtured from day one. You can't start training a dog at 8 months. You have to start training the dog on day one in a nice, loving manner. And that's where, over time, hopefully, we will see a change in the relationship between people and dogs in India.
Wow.
And I really, really hope so.
Really hope so. True. And that reminds me, it's a responsible, like, with freedom comes responsibility. With adoption, with a child, there is a response. You need to be a responsible citizen to coexist. Again, it's all about coexisting as well in a society over here. So, my next segment, I would want to know, why do you believe taking children on safari or into the wild is important in today's digital age?
I think it's so important for a child to be engrossed in nature. The senses awaken there, the sights, the smells, what you hear, but also that sixth sense that we have missing, the intuition, the gut. A child has disconnected with that living in this age, in the digital age, in cities. I've had kids on safari where they've never seen anything besides a crow or a pigeon, which is so sad because we are as much a part of this ecosystem that we have so disconnected ourselves from. So it's very important to connect with that. It's important that parents also understand it's not just a source of entertainment, it's a source of education.
Right.
And it's a sense of responsibility. I have this term, that the quote that I always say: what we can see, we can love, and what we can love, we will fight to protect.
Wow. Yeah.
And only if a kid can see something, over time it will learn to love it. And only if it can love it over time, they'll become the torchbearers of conservation and conserve it.
Absolutely. Wow. I wish, because many parents are scared to take their kids to safari because they feel, oh my God, it's open, so it's better to, there's zoo, the alternative is zoo. So, what do you feel? What do you feel about zoos? Like, is it the ethical way, or is it an alternative? Is there an ethical way to zoos?
I'll back up a little first and answer your question or rather the comment where that parents are scared to take their kids on safari. And that's true. But what I've realized is I've had close to about 50 kids on safari, varying ages. Youngest being 6 months old for 4 days, and then teenagers, toddlers, 6, 7 years old, every age you can imagine. It's never about the kid. It's always the parent. I always say, hey, you want to bring your kid on safari? Let me have a conversation with you. And I want to talk to you for a good half an hour. Your parenting style, how you react to your kids' needs, how you react to your kids' uncomfort. The 6-month-old on safari, my wife and I thought it'll be the most difficult. And my team member said, don't do it. But I had a conversation with the parents. Do they really want to do it? Do they understand what's going to go on for 4 days?
Yeah.
And they said, yes, no problem. We're going to understand. They were incredible parents. First, the husband and wife shared responsibilities. That's so important. Second, they listened to the kid, and they also made sure that they're not fussy over the kid's needs. So the first safari, the kid cried only for 10 minutes, but not loud. He was just uncomfortable. Then he found the rhythm, and the mother would feed every now and then. They would put a blanket and they would feed the kid, and he was so comfortable. And 4 days, he did not cry even once. He had the time of his life. I've never seen a 6-month-old smile so much. And also, like, he would want to come onto my uh, shoulders again and again, even though I'm not comfortable holding kids. I'm not a parent yet. And the mother was also just surprised. And it's really about the mothers and the fathers' reactions. Versus I've had kids like 7, 8 years old who've been amazing, and 7, 8 year olds who not have a good time at all because the mother and the father are reacting negative.
Yeah.
So it's all about that.
Yes.
And I guess coming to the second topic that you just said, which is the zoos, it's a very fine line. And Shana, I lean towards the fact that zoos are a thing of a past. We need to move away from it. I understand the ease of education through zoos and the connection of animals and the child through zoos. But then you're building a wrong connection, the building a wrong kind of future for the child's thought. You're teaching the child that it is okay for you to be educated at the expense of the animal. Did the tiger or the elephant want to be in that cage? No. We want our child to be educated about someone's torture, about the fact that it's okay for them to be in the cage. I always encourage, you can take your kids to Italy, UK, US, Maldives, but you can't take them to a safari to show them a wild animal. That's not good.
No.
So I think we should completely move away from zoos. There is no ethical way of doing it, unfortunately, because most zoos have either captured animals from the wild, or if they have not captured animals from the wild, they're running a breeding program which is instigating them being in the zoo itself. Or if they've rescued animals and that put them in the zoo, then that's where the fine line is on whether the animal should be in a place which is so confined.
Yeah.
It should be large enough to mimic the natural conditions. Today, I can't be like, you know what, let's get acquainted with how Sharanya is as a person and let's put her in a cage and for the rest of her life she lives there. How would you feel?
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
Yes.
Then, I could also argue, in order to love dogs and admire dogs, let's not keep them at home. Let's keep them in a cage and everyone can come and see the dog. It's a horrible life for a dog.
It is.
So I think the way we address zoos, the way we think of zoos, the way we think of education needs to change.
Change. Yes. I think it's become a matter of convenient. It's so convenient for
That-
families and parents to just, you don't want to come out of their comfort zone and experience something more richer and wild. So I also see a shift. Like I see a lot of family coming out and people are knowing safari and people are coming out and going for safari trips nowadays, which is a good sign. Absolutely. Which is something very, like any person I go and meet and they say, okay, you have been to this safari, that safari. So I think things are changing as well.
100%, 100%.
And so Yash, why do you believe taking children on safari? I think you've already answered that. For family planning their first wildlife safari trips with children, what are your golden rules that you would want to share?
Number one, it's about the parents, as I said. Okay, I'll give you another example. Food. All right. A kid who's 7 years old, that kid wants a pizza.
Food.
In the jungles, even if you stay at a very nice lodge and camp, if you want a pizza in the next 30 minutes, it's not possible. Maybe if you let the chef know 10, 11 hours in advance, he'll make it. Now, as a parent, if you address the lodge staff in front of the kid, ki, how's that not possible? This is unacceptable. What is the kid learning?
Okay.
That's example one. And it's happened in front of me. So this is example one. And the other kid wanted pasta. and was being a little cranky. Mom, I want to eat pasta. Why can't we have pasta? The mother replied, I won't say the kid's name. The mother replied saying, hey, we're in the jungle. You need to appreciate the fact that you're able to get pasta so easily in a city, but in a place like this, you're not. Why don't you eat this? If you don't feel like eating, then you're going to be hungry throughout the day. So you decide either you be hungry or you eat this. I'm not going to give in to this. The kid waited for 10, 20 minutes. And then after that, roti, sabzi, he's eating. So it's the parent's reaction, right? So I think number one is setting the expectation for yourself, for your kids. Kids are what we teach them. Number two, planning in advance. Especially if you're doing it with a family, you need to plan in advance. You need to make sure the logistics are fine. Some of these places are extremely remote. If you or your child has some medical condition, know that that medical condition or medical attention will not be provided at a place which is so remote. That's another thing to consider.
Have you experienced anything that?
I have experienced it, but not with a child. I've experienced it with a expecting mother, unfortunately. But that's where I'm always very careful, and I'm always very careful at letting people know that it is your decision. Don't make it likely.
Right.
And I think fourth one is also letting the kids really, really express their likes and dislikes and learning from it, not reacting to it, learning from it.
Yeah.
I've had a kid who always comes twice a year on safari since the age he was 5 till now he's 8, and he comes on our safari bringing his mom. It's not the other way around. He saw some of our content on YouTube while I don't know how he got that as a 5-year-old. Probably his father or mother were watching YouTube and must have said, Mom, meko ye bhi dekh raha hai. And he comes every year, twice with his mother, and he talks so much. He's so interested, and the mother just chills and lets the kid be.
Wow,
I love that.
wonderful. Yeah,
Love that.
it's so amazing. And that's how and that's how the kids learn and grow as
Correct,
well.
correct,
That's all.
correct.
Just let them be and
Yeah.
let them explore.
Can I add one more thing which is
Yes,
valuable? You know,
yes.
it's not only about animals or being being uncomfortable, experiencing discomfort,
Yeah.
but also the human connection. A lot of the kids now grow up in cities. They don't know what rural India looks like. They don't know the conditions rural India lives in. For them to see that is gonna make them appreciate this Mumbai house they're living much more.
Correct.
Because cars are taken for granted, ACs are taken for granted, clean water are taken for granted. इंडिया से इंटीरियर में जाकर देखो कि reality क्या है. That opens their mind up.
Yes. I always say this. So I love traveling. So whenever I travel, I like the slow travel kind of a thing where you actually go blend with the culture, the locals, and that itself teaches you so many things.
Correct.
So I think more kids, parents should do that with the kids.
Absolutely.
Blend them, just let them go into blend in with the culture, nature, everything.
Yeah.
So, what's the biggest misconception urban families have about wildlife travel?
That it's dangerous. I think people think, oh, how can I let the child be? Don't crows go for babies' ears, or eagles go for babies, or a tiger will come and snatch my baby. No, all that is false. I think it's glorified in the wrong manner in media. Movies like Carl did not help. I can tell you that all animals want to avoid humans, and at the same time they want to avoid conflict. You know, today someone hits me and I get injured, I can go to the hospital and get myself fixed. But if that happens to an animal, the only way for it to fix itself is through licking itself.
Yeah.
If it can't lick its wound, it won't survive. So animals want to avoid conflict. Safaris are completely safe. You have to be in a vehicle. Don't walk around in the jungle with your kid, of course. Be in a vehicle. Be with a trained professional, such as me and my team. Don't do it with untrained people, because that's when things can go wrong also. So be thorough with your planning. Go with professionals and have an open mind to experiences.
What about kids crying? If they cry when they're in the safaris, like, is there any do's and don'ts? Like, it's advisable, suggested to be silent.
Of course, it's suggested to be silent, but again, kids have needs, adults have needs. In order to ensure that those needs are addressed, you need to listen to the kid. So, for example, if your kid is really crying, maybe it needs a change of a nappy, you need to do that. Maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's too cold, too hot, then you call off the safari. It's okay to call off the safari. I've had a kid once who was crying a little bit, and we were also at a sighting. Then I chose to remove myself off the sighting so that we don't disturb anyone else or the animal that's there. It's okay to go to some other part of the reserve, park on the side in a quiet corner, and just be. Let the kid cry out and then resume the safari afterwards. You know, a kid crying on one corner of the jungle is not going to disrupt the peace of the jungle so much so that the jungle ceases to exist. I think people tend to dramatize it. ठीक है बच्चा रो रहा है तो रोने दो बेचारे को. It's okay. Resume afterwards.
Yes.
But address the kid's need and then resume.
Yeah, I think again it comes back to the lack of information, I think, and the scaredness of parents that, okay, if if the child cries or something, whatever, tiger comes or a lion comes,
Nothing will
so
happen.
that, I think that's the basic general thoughts that comes into a parent's mind first.
Never.
But yeah,
In
that's
fact,
that's
like
a good way.
one time what happened was there was a tiger sitting very close to us, and another vehicle came, and the road was a little wobbly. So the vehicle parked a little like this on the right. The kid must have been sleeping. The vehicle jerked, so it woke up and started crying. And the cry was suddenly so loud that the tiger got a little scared. Okay, and then it just walked up and then went a little far and then sat back down. So that's evidence that the tiger was actually disturbed at that moment. And again, of course, we talked about a little bit of disturbance, but that's part of the parcel. Sometimes instances like these will happen. It doesn't mean the kid's fault. There are also adults who are screaming in national parks, whistling at animals and screaming like, "Arey, wow, wow, dekh, bhai, dekh."
Selfies.
Exactly. So it's not about kids. It's about civility in humans in general.
True. And wow, I got some takeaways from there if I'm taking my child for a safari. And can you recall a moment where a child on safari surprised you? I think you mentioned one. If you have you with their awareness or curiosity.
Yeah, I think again happened with the 6 month old because by the time a kid is 2 or 3 years old, you expect them to be aware of their surroundings, be appreciative or point at a tree, point at an animal. But I never expected a 6 month old. We are driving the first day, and while we had stopped at deer, at that time he was asleep. But then after that, we didn't stop at a deer because the parents had seen it. I wasn't aware the kids seeing it. And just while going past the deer, he just did this, pointed. No, I was like, what? And then I stop. Did he point at a deer? And even the parents were surprised that he was pointing, acknowledging the fact that there's something interesting and I want to see it.
Wow.
A 6 month old doing that completely blew my mind.
Wow. I always believe that natures are the best way to stimulate your brain, all those senses. Uh, even book, I feel sometimes it's a dead thing.
Yeah.
Like it's a lovely thing to read a book, but too much of reading book also, you're just living with the dead.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think you need to go out and be with the wild or nature, and that's the best learning experience.
Yeah, actually, you're so right. A safari provides so much stimulation to a kids that there's no way for it to be bored.
Yeah. And I think I've traveled everywhere, but for me, the safari experience has been life changing. Like, it calls you back again and again, it's like, it's not like, oh, I've done one safari, I'm done. It definitely calls you back again and again, you don't want
why?
to do.
For you, why is that?
Because for me, it's that connection of, the slow, when you just look at a tiger walking, and the grace, the connect, and all those things is like, I've been 2, 3 safaris old, but for me, that the nature, the wild, the fresh air, all those things, for me, it's a drive for me. It's like a big major drive,
Yeah,
and it keeps calling me back.
I love that.
And there is a lot for me to explore. There's a lot for me to learn. But I know for sure that people who go there once, they come back again.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing. Yes, it is addictive. So, Suyash, how can parents prepare their kids to be in the nature? Is there anything else that you want to add on to, like?
I think teaching kids respect actually begins at home. You know, you can't learn to respect nature unless you learn to respect humans around you. And with the staff at home, especially how you talk to them, how you talk to your drivers, your cooks, the maid that might be taking care of the child, it's always like, Didi, bhaiya, ye karo, wo karo. But have you stopped to ask them their story? That's how the kid will learn respect. They are also humans. Maybe they're not at the same socioeconomic standing as you, but they're also humans. If you can't respect a human, can you respect nature? Can you respect wild animals who don't seem to show you emotions as vividly as a human? So I think if parents can teach their kids that level of respect at home, कि उनसे भी प्यार से बात करो, उनको भी सॉरी थैंक यू बोलो, उनको भी वेलकम बोलो, उनको भी रिक्वेस्ट करो, उनकी लाइफ जर्नी सोचो, आज उनकी तबीयत खराब है, ask them how they're feeling. Tell them it's okay. Today you're not feeling okay. No problem. That's how they become mature at a very young age, understand emotions, understand feelings, and that's how they can understand nature. They can respect wild animals. They can respect every single being. And that's very important and crucial.
Yeah, very true. Uh, Tell me how, so childhood is it's a very important phase of your life.
Correct.
And what you learn in those formative years stays with you. Any incident that stayed with you, like with respect to how you mentioned about the animals inside the zoo you saw. Is there anything else from that you've taken from your parents that you want to carry it ahead to your child?
I think my parents were very hands on with the love and care, but hands off with adventure. All right. I grew up in Madhya Pradesh. You can imagine our summers. It reaches 45, 48 degrees.
Yes.
My youngest childhood memories are playing non-stop every single day. Rain, cold, shine, heat, doesn't matter. Only in May and June, when it's 40s out, my mom would request me, beta, please, tumhe khelna hai. Get up early in the morning or go late in the evening, but play your heart out during those hours. I just don't want you to fall sick. And I think the concept of play nowadays is so hijacked by parents, by school. I mean, the amount of homework kids get. I have a friend who has a 6-year-old child, and he's like, yeah, the summers she has a lot of assignments. She has to read this. I'm like, what are you doing? Teach them how to play.
Yes.
Teach them how to play. Teach them how to interact with people, understand their emotions, understand their physical and mental capabilities in ways that are beyond an assignment, a book. Life bhar to unko padhna hai, let them enjoy now. So I think what I'll take away from that is how my parents really brought me up. Okay, you want to study? 1 hour of the day in the summers you have to dedicate to that. But rest of the day, play your heart out. Not TV, not video games. Play your heart out. You want to climb a tree will put pillows under that tree. You want to hang upside down from a swing? That's okay, we'll put a pillow under the swing. You want to roll down the hill? No problem. You want to jump into the mud? No problem. That's how I would be as a parent for sure.
Wow. That also comes back that nowadays kids are not let to be bored.
Correct.
They don't know what to do of boredom. That's something I think when I was a child during my 90s and everything, we used to get bored and we used to handle it ourselves. Nowadays there is a schedule for everything. Okay, so the schedule is so packed that you're not getting bored. There's no time to get bored. So yes, that's a wonderful takeaway that you've got. So I would like to come to conscious parenting and environmental impact. How do everyday parenting decisions, like what we buy, how we uh, consume content, consume anything, like anything, or even what toys we give to our children, impact the larger environmental space?
That's a very good and important question. I think there are two problems here. Number one is on the front of businesses. Unfortunately, India has not reached that stage where conscious consumerism on both business side and consumer side is there. From the business part, to be able to offer that this is an alternative to plastic, this is an alternative to XYZ, which is so bad for the environment, that's not there. They're not providing it. And that's why consumers are not buying it. But from the consumer's point of view, also, they want the cheapest, fastest, easiest alternatives. And both sides need to change over time. However, the biggest problem that comes there is naturally something that's better for the environment and not mass produced is going to be at a premium in the beginning. So that's where the challenge also comes. Sometimes it is a privilege to make those sustainable decisions. Like organic food, the food that is produced in bulk, pesticides sprayed, versus that tomato that's hand grown without pesticides, that tomato is going to cost much more. The environmental impact of that tomato is going to be lesser. So it's also very difficult to make those choices in India. Our population is too much. But when it comes to parenting as a whole, there are a few things that people can definitely do to improve that. And the mentality should always be less is more.
Yeah.
Your kid does not need that plastic toy again and again. You know, we hardly know about microplastics, but the kid, the way to interact with any toy or any fabric is to put it in his mouth. The microplastic or what it's covered and coated with, the wax layering or the paint layering, is it child safe? Is it lead free? Those aren't even things that are mentioned in India. And that's going into your child's system. And we don't really know how badly it's affecting the child because data is not there. There's data in the Western society, especially in the US, showcasing all that. And that's why it's mandatory in US to have certain labels on child products, but not in India. So I think till the time we continue to propagate this consumerism without having a certain sense of responsibility, that's not going to change.
Yes. Parents. And I really liked the less is more.
Yeah.
Loved it. Because I do that with my child, like whenever we get something new, we discard something. So that, she knows she only has couple of 1, 2, 3. And then nowadays, you pre-love stuff, you do that.
Correct.
So it's a very difficult decision for a parent to also follow it.
Yeah.
Because in this competitive world, I feel there are so many other kids doing everything. So you feel, are we depriving our child of anything? So that's a kind of dilemma that you get
That's
into.
because of comparison, right?
Yes.
If you compare with someone who's not
Yeah.
depriving it, that's their parenting style.
Yeah.
So if a kid from the same socioeconomic background, let's say, they are very well to do, two kids, their parents rather, one goes by, okay, every day new toy or every week a new toy. One goes by, no, this is a toy you're gonna play with. Otherwise, play with the sand, play with the mud, play with natural elements. The kid here is going to learn a lot more. The kid here is going to learn that objects give me happiness. And then when kids grow up, we ask these questions. Why is it that only money brings you happiness? Why is it that you want a new car? Why is it that you're not happy with the house? Why is it that you're not happy with your backpack or lunchbox? Why? Because you have been conditioned to not be happy with that one toy or two toys that you got because your way of thinking of playing is just that toy.
Net.
And I didn't grow up like that. I really did not. So I see my childhood and I think of growing up my child in that manner.
Oh, yes. I agree. So any what advice would you give new age parent who wants to raise a eco-conscious child? Anything else that you want to add to it?
So, raising an eco-conscious child is tricky in this day and age.
No,
But
it is.
you can make small things. Just telling the child to maybe take a shorter shower. Kids love playing with water. I love playing with water. That's great. But unfortunately, the conditions we live in, you can't have the shower on for half an hour. Even if the child is taking like 10-minute shower, reducing it by a minute, telling them to consciously think about it. Not saying you have to reduce it, not strict. Tell them why.
Why?
You know that 1 minute of water saving can actually impact the lives of Simba the lion,
Yeah.
talking like that, or of rural India. I think connecting those and making them make the lifestyle choices will have a huge impact. Not throwing wrappers and plastics everywhere,
Yes.
just collecting that and then putting it in the garbage. Small things like that can make better citizens.
Yeah. I was watching a video in between. So you have these seashells that you find on the beach. Even picking that up and taking it home also destroys the ecosystem
Yes.
of the ocean. And so these are the little things that nowadays, thankfully, awareness people are getting to know about so many things. It just amuses me that how much less knowledge we have, and there is so much of information that we don't have.
Correct. But that's
Yeah.
where, like, coming to your question, the advice is always like gonna be tell the kid why they shouldn't do it. You can scold the kid saying, "Oh no, don't pick up those." But why?
Right.
If I know why as a kid, that maybe me picking that up is actually leading to some problems, then that's fine. Otherwise, I'm just thinking mom is shouting at me because she doesn't want me to get my hand dirty. Tell them the why. Why are you scared of not telling them the why?
Right. Or if you don't know, just say, I'll come back to you.
Exactly.
I get that information and come back to you. That's what I've learned.
I love
That's what I've learned. If you don't know anything, wait for a day or wait for some time, I'll come back to you. Yes. So, Suyash, my next question is, we still see animal derived accessories being marked as luxury or ivory. What's the long term cost of these choices? Is there?
the long-term cost of products, especially of the animals procured from the wild, is immense. It when you take animals away from an ecosystem, it causes havoc. Okay, let's talk about elephants. The tusks. Ivory is a big, big market in the world. Whether legal, illegal, depends on the country. But elephants are incredible members of the ecosystem. While moving through different ecosystems, they create pathways for other animals. They clear the vegetation so that the smaller grass can flourish and other animals can eat it. When you kill one elephant, the entire family mourns for months and years for that elephant. Imagine the trauma you're putting them through. We talk about snakeskin bags, crocodile bags, and they're sold for so much money.
How do you respond to people when they say it's just one item or it's already made and I've not killed it? When you see people using crocodile skin made items or tiger skin, how do you respond?
When people are thinking about these kinds of instances, they have a very narrow field of view. They think micro. But if you look at the macro picture, if millions of people justify the use of a crocodile skin that way, then you have millions of crocodiles being hunted and killed for crocodile skin bags.
No.
So I always tell people, you're part of the demand. If the demand stops, the killing can too. It's as simple as that.
What role do influencers and creators today play in shaping what's considered to be acceptable or aspirational?
I think influencers, creators in this day and age, especially when social media is so accessible, are the number one bridge between that thought that can lead to the destruction of nature over time or the saving of nature over time. So I think people need to be very careful in the content they put up on social media. They need to start advocating for sustainability, for mindful consumerism, rather than take it all, don't care about nature, don't care about wildlife, and just consume, consume, consume. Think of the footprint you're having. Less is more. That's the philosophy that we need to go forward with.
And I think creators have a huge voice.
Absolutely.
I think that voice matters so much. And you're doing a wonderful job
Thank
with that voice that you have. And what would you say to parents who argue that zoos are the only way that kids see animals?
As we said earlier as well, take your kid on a safari, and I'm sure that thought will change. The kids will enjoy it a lot, you will enjoy it a lot, and have a new perspective on life.
Yeah.
How can parents teach kids to admire wildlife without the need to touch, pose, or get too close to the wild?
It's what you teach to kids. Again, education is so important at home itself. Kids also grow up watching this stuff online. When they're seeing it online, you have to teach them why it's wrong. That tiger that's in Bangkok in a petting enclosure is there against its will. It's very ill treated. It's probably sedated, extremely tortured, and confined in a manner that the soul is broken. It's given up. If you teach the kid in that manner, the kid will also learn, okay, I should not involve myself in these kind of situations or these kind of activities, let alone pay for it.
Yours.
My last question to you. If a parent says, I'm just one person, what difference can I make? How would you answer them?
It's again the same mentality. If people think so micro that they will never be able to change who they are, and we will never be able to change this world in order to become a better place. People have to think, if I'm thinking like that, millions are thinking like that, billions are thinking like that this will never change. So it's not about the one person. It actually starts with one person. You want to change? Start with one person. Change yourself. Change those around you. Be a positive leader in those changing attitudes. And then over time, it'll change. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any closing thought again that you'd want to tell parents?
I think give wildlife an opportunity. Come on a safari. See it with your kids. See it with your family. Have an open mind. Allow me and my team to get involved and curate this experience for you, and see how it really impacts you for the rest of your life.